This is a very brief overview of Chapter 1. This does not replace reading Chapter 1. You do need to read it, but we will briefly go over some of the things you will cover in Chapter 1. Chapter 1, of course, is the sociology of the family, and many of us, when looking at our families, the interest is we want to know who we're related to. We see a lot of that now with things like Ancestry.com, where you can take your DNA and you can find, people who you didn't know were related to you. So there's a big interest now in just who is biological family. But how do we define these families? Because they define all differently. This is a picture of the story in your book about a woman who was adopted. She was from a Russian orphanage. Adopted, you're still family. So, how do we define family? You can define family as biological, legal, or emotional connection. Emotional connections we refer to as families of affinity. So you have your personal family, and those are people that you feel related to and expect us to define them as members of our family. And we all have them, people that maybe not are related by blood, but are related by love. Then you have your actual legal family, and that's related by birth, marriage, or adoption. And when you look at family in the institutional arena, then that's the social space which relationships between people in common positions are governed by accepted rules of interaction. In other words, every family has their family ways. We all have things that we do as a family, things that are our own family traditions. I like to, when my boys were growing up, Christmas Eve, everybody who was working would be off work, so I would come home and make clam chowder and homemade rolls. And that's our family tradition until the boys got married and then their wives were involved. And now it's no longer a family tradition, but it's just things that families do together. And again, when you're at home, that's the arena for where you practice intimacy, childbearing, rearing, child rearing, socialization, and caring for. You care for your children. You may care for your parents. And in this country, we even consider our pets as part of our family. There's also the family that gets where the state is involved. So the state may become involved in your family. If, say, you get a divorce, then the state is now involved in how your family is defined. Of course, it defines, the violence. And the state can define how resources are redistributed, especially in divorces. So this is just a Venn diagram of how everything intersects. So your family isn't in a bubble all by itself. You see, your family will intersect with the state in one way or another, even if it's just paying your taxes. You'll interact with the market, maybe through child care or elder care, or maybe, you're an older person in your own Social Security. So your family interacts with other institutions in society. And of course we have marriage licenses, and the thing with marriage licenses, the law defines who can and who cannot get married. And that's always a question I like to ask my students. If we critically think through that question, why should the state define who can and who cannot get married? That seems like that would be part of the pursuit of happiness, or in some cases the pursuit of unhappiness. But marriage license, that's a personal decision. So you have to critically think through these things, because these are questions that you may end up having to answer in one of those other arenas, like the political arena. And of course, families, sometimes they need help. So you may get, there may be, they go to the state for assistance. They call it welfare in some states, family assistance in other states. But this is just another example of how the family and its well-being can overlap and interact with other larger social institutions. The census is one way how we define family, and this is a good, shows you how you check, okay, this is, how are you related to this person? And they give you all these relationships. I like the fact that they have in there other non-relative, because sometimes you are taking care of people who aren't your relatives, but you still are responsible for them because of affinity, because of love. And in the past, they weren't recognized as family. So this is a positive step forward for the state to recognize our rights to define who's our family and who isn't. And of course, we have the census. The census goes in and counts families and goes in and asks us, of course it's all self-reported, but we self-report our families. And we self-report who is in our household. And of course they want to know who's the head of household and other members in the household. And since 1840, individuals started to be recorded separately, but all listed under head of household. Of course, in 1840, slaves weren't counted. And so we have our census family. We have our family, our actual family, and then what goes on the census, what we're allowed to count on our census as family. And there are many different so many different and conflicting theories about family. And we'll briefly go over many of them, but understand that one theory never explains one situation entirely. As sociologists, when we start to study families, we have to study the family and then decide which theory would explain whatever social phenomenon. So you have that broad perspective theory, and two broad perspective theories are conflict theory and consensus theory. And consensus theory is just the perspective that projects an image of society as a collective expression of shared norms and values. So in other words, our family is just the micro example of the larger society. It's reflective of this larger society because we expect other people to share some of our norms, and that's how we live together. If we didn't share these norms, we wouldn't be able to live together peacefully as a larger sociological unit, or societal unit, larger societal unit. So you have the breadwinner, and that breadwinner is usually one person goes out and works and brings home the money. The breadwinner situation happened after the advent of the Industrial Revolution. Prior to that, families lived on farms and everybody worked together to be successful. Then when we moved to the cities to work in factories, that's when we ended up with the breadwinner situation where one person worked, one person stayed home with the children, and the children really didn't assist in helping with the family at all. Now, it was the opposite on the farm. The children helped all the time on the farm. Conflict theory basically says that families just reinforce societal inequities. They say family teaches girls to be helpless and teaches boys to be aggressive. So conflict theory looks at that sort of dynamic within the family. And then we have contemporary theories like feminism. And feminism theory is an exchange theory that individuals with different resources, strengths, and weaknesses enter into mutual relationships to maximize their own gains. So in other words, when we're looking for a mate, we're looking for someone who will help or bring to the table something that we can't bring to the table ourselves. In other words, everybody will bring their own uniqueness to the table and blend it together, and that will make a stronger unit. Symbolic interactionists tend to look at it's the only micro level sociological theory, and it tends to look at the interaction on a smaller level. So it'll look at the family, unique interactions within the family, and maybe compare it to the unique interactions within another family. Modernity theory is a theory of historical emergence. In other words, we're kind of evolving as we go into all the things that happen in modern times that change the way a family is. If you think about it, in the 50s, everybody sat down and had dinner together, but now with technology and everybody on the move, it might be a unique situation for everybody to sit down and have dinner together. So modernity just says, we're kind of evolving, and then family is changing to adapt to all the new things that come into our lives. And then, of course, the book will talk about first modernity, second modernity, and we'll talk briefly about this, family wages, because in the past a family could live on one breadwinner, one person going out earning the money. But with inflation and things that have gone on in our modern world, we now need almost two wages just to survive. So that's another problem we have to look at for families. If both mother and father have to go out and work, who cares for the children? What kind of care do they get? These are things you will have to think about, and we'll go into the political arena when it's time to vote. It may be, you may be asked to vote on, should companies provide daycare for their workers so that the parents can bring the child to work with them, and then take the child home with them. And, daycare would take care of getting them to a proper school and making sure that they're educated through the day. And then bring them back to daycare so they're where you can pick them up and take them home. Those are very important issues for modern families. Child care is very expensive. There is a Michael Moore movie, if you have Netflix, it's called Who Should We Conquer Next? And it's very interesting because it talks about how European countries address the things such as daycare, elder care, vacations, things that impact the family. And a lot of European countries put the family first. Americans say they put family first, but we tend to put profit first. Whereas European countries put family first. So we look at the market. Okay, I'm sorry, I kind of went too fast there. Okay, well, those are just the different theories, and you can read about all the theories in the chapter. I don't want these lectures to go on too long. I've already gone 13 minutes. I try to keep them at 10 minutes. So I'll go ahead and end this lecture here. Be sure to read the book. If you don't understand the theories, then those are questions that you should bring up on your discussion board so that we can talk about them. Okay, and I will see you next class.